Hello, I'm Charlie, and welcome to the first in a new series of reviews. Today, we'll be taking a look at Final Fantasy XV, played on the PlayStation 4. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting to think the Deus Ex Human Revolution poster wasn't a joke, and that Square Enix is truly striving for 27 main entries. We can call this 15, but we all know it's not. There have been dozens of these games across multiple platforms. With a game series running since the 80s, it's unsurprising to find the fanbase divided on each iteration into the Final Fantasy name. Final Fantasy 15 marks a 10-year wait come to light, and even then it's half finished. The story follows Noctis Lucis Kylan, a mandatory teenage boy, and his journey to become king of the city of Insomnia. No, I wish I were joking. The writers think they're being clever by taking themes translated into Latin to use as names. Accompanying him are Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio, the handsome bodyguard detailed with escorting Noctis across the continent during wartime to have a wedding. Let's be honest, a good chunk of people playing Final Fantasy games are in it for the story. If you're looking for a deep, compelling narrative full of intrigue and whimsy, this is going to be bitter. Square Enix haven't been able to write a decent story in years. Everything from the 13 line and its spin-offs are trite, and the writing in this game can't really be lauded above that. What can be said is the characterization is good, it's on point, and it's a step in the right direction. If you're looking for the boy band adventure of a lifetime, you're good to go. The interactions between the characters is endearing. Even if it doesn't fit what you'd expect for a royal escort, they're fun, discussing what they enjoy and dislike, events in the game, what they'd like to do, and more. The dialogue between the characters is something to get invested in, and that goes for more than just the party. You'll find lovable villains and side characters along the way too. The gameplay finally has Square Enix throwing their half and half compromises between ATB and action combat in the bin, opting instead for full action combat. You can equip Noctis with a variety of weapons that change his playstyle, and Royal Arms that drain health to attack, but deal extra damage. There's a great deal of depth to the combat, and it's brought me back into the fold as someone that held disdain for the combat in 12 and 13 alike. Magic takes a new system, and it's fairly broken. You craft magic, it has limited uses, but it is by far the most proficient offensive ability in the game. The base enemies don't really warrant anything too extreme, so you can stock up your Quintcast Firagas and Blizzagas for a more problematic foe. As of reviewing, I'm playing a patched version of the game that allows you to switch to other characters. This made so many encounters more fun. There were times I'd get thrown around as Noctis, and a strategic change would bring me right back into the combat. It kept me invested. All of this said, there's an elephant in the room. As much depth as the combat has, there's no real reason to utilize it. You don't gain any significant rewards from dashing around with different weapons, and when you realize magic solves all your problems, it stops even necessitating thought over it. Items straight up negate any threatening mechanics, and spells demolish bosses. There's nothing to really sweat over. It speaks volumes when the hardest dungeons have to block item usage. Summons have different criteria to actually be summoned. It's less of a conscious process and more of a get out of jail free card. Summons will tear enemies apart, and it just feels unnecessary. In a game where items and spells already diminish the value of bosses, summons are just an insult. I guess this is just the teething process Square are going through of changing to an entirely new combat dynamic. While all of the above make many boss battles feel trivial in practice, the delivery still keeps them feeling epic. Fighting Titan Yarkian felt imposing, though mechanically it wasn't remotely threatening. If you're itching for a challenge, you're going to have to venture into one of the many scattered secret dungeons. Unfortunately, you'll also need to get the key to unlock the extra hard parts of the dungeons. Just don't expect anything too challenging up until that point. As you may have realized from the Dusky demo, Final Fantasy XV has a huge open world for you to explore. It looks great and it plays fairly well to boot. Don't be fooled by its size or the preview trailers though. It's not quite as populated or varied as you might think. Areas like the volcano are one-offs, and some areas like the snow areas straight up aren't explorable or open world at all. When I opened the map, I was aghast at how large the area was, and foolishly believed there had been multiple areas. It's just the one. Luckily, for such a large open world, you have a few ways to get around. Most of your time will be in the Regalia, the custom-made car for the gang. Expansions initially allowed the Regalia to fly, but it kind of sucked, and it's been backpedaled into an off-road version of the car that's functionally similar but ultimately less cumbersome and, well, less terrible. Perhaps the most rewarding way to get around is your fully customizable chocobo. It's fast, fluffy, and cute. Unfortunately with the car, petrol stations become mandatory, and strangely enough it's petrol stations that act as the mandatory quest hubs throughout. The cracks in development begin to seep in here. Because of such an enormous world, it's a red flag when the quest hubs are diminutive and repetitive. Restaurants and diners found out, you guessed it, petrol stations will offer quests, map markers, and hunts. The hunts feature has been brought up from Final Fantasy XII and offers a little extra variation in the side quests. I found myself on hunts in less than favourable environments. One particular hunt for Spiricorns had me in an environment particularly hostile towards the camera. Again, the cracks are showing, and it's not the world map that seems to bear the brunt of cutbacks from Final Fantasy XV, it's the gameplay that suffers. Once you realise the world is a rolling expanse of nothing conjoined by roads and diners, some of the magic is lost. Some of the most fun to be found in Final Fantasy XV is in the fluff content. Chocobo races, mini pinball games, hunts, secret dungeons, and each of the amazing boy band skills breathe some life back into the mix. Fishing isn't that fun, but I'm not a fishing guy. The cooking provides stat boosts and the food looks Ghibli levels of edible. Gladio will randomly find useful items, but the high point goes to Prompto with his photography skills. Each time you rest, Prompto will give you a gallery of the snaps he took. Some of these are scripted, most of them are dynamic, and if you like you can choose to take pictures from the menu. As crazy as it sounds, this is one feature I'd love to persist into newer Final Fantasies. There's something really satisfying about opening up a huge gallery of snaps of your adventures that makes it feel like it truly belongs in the mix. Your journeys are kept company by the amazing soundtrack. The OST feels tailored towards the more unique points and plot elements. The real victory here is access to some of the high points in Final Fantasy's soundtrack as a whole. While you'll have to buy the album in-game and an MP3 player item to listen on foot, you can have access to some of the classics. There's just something special about tracks like Xanarkand that make them great to listen to regardless of what you're playing. However, no soundtrack is adequately redeeming for what feels like substantial amounts of cut content. Square Enix are deeply guilty of building up mechanics and then dropping them all throughout the main plot. 2 or 3 of the missions have you assault Imperial strongholds. One specifically makes you stealth and follow an enemy leader, another has you outright assault the base. With growing Imperial presence in the accessible world map, it feels like it's going to be a prevalent part of the game to come, but it just never seems to happen. This unfortunately rings true further throughout, where the first 10 chapters periodically expand the game world, the last 5 cut you down into a linear segment. There's a joke to be made about railroading you into completing the main plot, but the game literally segues you from critical plot point to critical plot point on a train. Where it feels like we should be exploring the surrounding areas of Tenebrae, we just see it off in the distance for all of 10 minutes before being ushered into the next plot point. The last 5 chapters are where the game has quickly dropped gameplay mechanics everywhere. One chapter was so painful to play, they ended up making an alternative route through it. Justifiably. I played through the original segment, and it was a dull attempt at a horror game, with obvious jump scares and a half-hearted, nonchalant attempt at disempowering the protagonist. The developers really dropped the ball. This all stinks of Square Enix having pre-developed these mechanics, but ultimately lacking the resources to flesh them out with good and even distribution. Instead, these hurried plot mechanics, like the above horror-esque gobbledygook, feel intensely forced as the plot shrinks to a linear close. The surrounding world is no longer rich, explorable and vast. It's a set piece in the background. It's a true disservice to everything they built up. Now, in fairness, the final chapter feels well executed, and a fitting conclusion to the events throughout. If you can ignore a glaring trope, a flash forward in time, you're set. The final chapter has fun dialogue, and some genuinely threatening circumstances, and a satisfying final boss to look forward to fighting. There's some great dialogue and lore explained in this final segment. Some of it will feel disjointed if you didn't pay attention, but it is all cohesively woven together. To conclude, the game is great fun. It has enough feel-good moments through the boy band's interactions, skills, and successes to keep it engaging. It cannot be overstated that the game loses traction in its penultimate chapter, but thankfully reins it back into a decent ending. Hopefully Square Enix will shed their teething pains, evidently experienced in the 10-year development cycle, and produce a truly grand tale with their next game.
Certainly didn't expect this much trouble. That's game.
Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.